Well, thanks for having me to give a talk, and I'm glad you come along. And it's, it's quite nice out here, so we're all comfortable. Now, I spoke to Nick before we decided on what we were going to do this talk on, and Nick said that you have already had a talk on fly casting, correct? Right.
Very good. Yes.
Fly casting?
Yeah.
Right. Well, fly casting is the first step to a good presentation. Right? So being you've already had a talk on fly casting, let me ask some questions. Because you need to know, and you aren't in it, because he's just done his CCI.
Talk on casting was specifically about the stop.
Yep. But that's just part of casting.
That's just part of the casting.
Right. So, someone tell me there's four main things in casting. That's very general. So can someone give me one thing that's important in casting?
No slack.
No slack. Is that just in casting?
When you're playing with caterfish as well.
Yeah. No, slack is the most important thing in presentation. But it's also one of the major things in fly casting. Right, what's another thing?
Line speed. Line speed.
What causes line speed?
Tight loops.
Good physics in casting. So the rules in casting, that's what I'm basically looking at, because if you've got good physics in casting, that's the first step to be able to make a good presentation. Once you have good physics in casting, then it comes down to your fly line and your leader, so we don't get slack. Right, so let's go back to the casting, because that's the first thing, right? Rule number one in casting, right? You cannot start the cast until you move the end of the line. Pausing, right? So if you have a loop that forms, the loop's like this, correct? Right? It goes out, and when it's straight to the fly, here's the end of your fly line, here's your rod, then you come forward. Right? Really important rule. Not just for casting, but for fishing as well. Right? Nick got some mangrove jack. Someone else was fishing around in mangroves and couldn't get the presentation. Right. So you make a cast out, and what happens is you don't have a good stop, right? So you can tell that it's at the end of the power stroke, because that's where the stop is when you make the presentation. If your line is straight and your leader goes like that to the fly, because it's at the end of the cast, it's at the end of the power stroke where the mistake is made. Okay? Right, so slack is important, and you can't start the cast till you move the end of the line. Second rule.
So the squiggly leader,
Yep.
you're saying you're not stopping correctly.
Not stopping correctly, or it could be a gear problem. Some people, time fly effort is completely built around tuna fishing, completely, right? Some people say tuna fishing's easy, right? Just this much leader, tie a fly on. That leader will not lay out properly. Does anyone know why it won't lay out properly? Anyone want to have a go at it?
Not tapered.
Yeah. Why is a leader tapered?
Transfer of energy.
Exactly right, 110%. What you'll learn to do is bend the fly rod, right? You bend the fly rod, you stop, right? Stopping's important, right? It's more important than anything else in the presentation, because you have to anchor the butt of the rod to allow the rod to throw it forward. How many times have you seen this? There's a fish in front, like that. And as they stop, they lean forward. No, what it's done is they haven't anchored the butt of the rod and allowed the rod to make the cast. So what happens is the rod is fully loaded, you come through, you hit the stop, the rod's unloading, and you lean forward. So the rod has unloaded at probably 15, could be 20% of its actual recoil speed. Does everyone know why why fly rods have such cheap looking runners and shitty little bloody binds and really thin epoxy, and the rod's worth $2,000. You think they'd put a fancy butt wrap on it and, you know, have multicoloured flaming whatevers? Does anyone know why they don't do that on a fly rod?
Reduce resistance.
Resistance?
Flexibility.
Flexibility, yeah. The more weight you have on the end of a fly rod, the less it recoils. So that's why fly rods, when they first brought a Kennedy Fisher rod into the country, everyone looked at it. The epoxy must have been something like, it was the most frugal epoxy guy that you could ever come across, because I don't even think there was epoxy on it. But what they were trying to achieve was the absolute ultralight rod, so the blank is not hindered when it actually recoils. But anyway, we're getting away from the subject, right? So, first rule is what? Can't start the cast till you move the end of the line, right? Second rule, the length of the power stroke is directly proportionate to how much line is held in the air, right? That's a very important rule. Oh, I didn't bring a rag. Hang on, yes, I got a rag. Now, here's a question I want you to think about, right? Why is the length of the power stroke so important? Yep.
I'm just thinking.
Yeah, no, I want you to try and think about it, because, see, the interesting part about fly fishing, right, it's a thinking man's sport. That's why in countries where they don't have any fish stocks, they have fly shops, because tying the flies is fun. Yep.
So what are you referring to as power? You said power stroke?
This is a power stroke,
Yep.
and this is a power stroke. The rule is the amount of line that you're holding in the air, the length of the power stroke is directly proportional to how much line's held in the air. Short power stroke, short length of line. Long power stroke, long length of line.
You've got to be able to move the weight
Load.
and length of line.
Sorry?
You've got to be able to move that weight and length
Yes.
of line.
Yeah, but that's not what the rules. That's not what the rules about. It's really
Load the,
it's loading, but what?
well, loading the rod
Yeah.
to be able to transfer.
Yep. So if you have a short length of line, how much weight have you got out? So which part do you want to bend? The tip, 100%. So if your power stroke is short, from here to here, the tip is really nearly vertical, so which bit's going to bend? The tip. So now I'm neck, right, and I'm carrying 70 feet of line in the air, I'm built like a brick shithouse, and I've got 70 feet of line in, and now my rod's back here, so which bit's bending? The butt. Why is the butt bending? Yeah, there's 70 feet of line in the air. Does everybody know that the fly line is made first and then the rod is made to cast the fly line? I know you do. If you don't, you'll get your butt kicked.
I'm sitting here agreeing to it.
Yeah?
Say it again.
The fly line is made first, and then the rod maker makes a rod to cast the fly line. The fly line is the standard, and the standard is the front 30 foot of the line is weighed, and that's called the AFTM standard, and then the rod maker makes the rod to cast the standard. So if you've got 70 feet of line in the air, and it's an 8-weight rod, how much weight have you got in the air? It's a lot more than a bloody 8-weight. It's about a 10-weight, maybe even more. That's why you have to bend the butt. The tip won't hold it. So you have to take the tip out of the road so that the butt will bend, not the tip. Yeah? All right? And that's the biggest rule that gets broken when there's a fish sitting in front of you, because you go like this. Righto, so you've got the length of the power stroke is directly proportional to how much line's held in the air. The next rule is the application of power. Now, who's thrown a tailing loop? Yeah, if you haven't thrown a tailing loop, you're sitting there watching TV and Netflix, right? The application of power is in the power stroke is pure acceleration. In other words, the slower you start to the faster you finish is where you get the torque, right? Does anyone want to have a go at what causes the tailing loop?
Too much power.
Overpowering?
Early power.
Or something. Going ahead of the.
Not continually accelerating.
Yes, that's right. Now it's okay to know, what causes the tailing loop. It's more important to know what causes you to apply the acceleration incorrectly. So, Lefty Kreh makes a statement in all of his books, in all of his videos, creep is bad, reach is good, right?
We're not allowed to use the word creep anymore, it's drag.
Oh my God.
In electrical applications, and we're not allowed
What?
to use the word load
They're not,
rod.
they're not, oh, God, I'm glad I got out of it.
It's bullshit.
Lefty Kreh is by far the greatest fly caster that God ever put breath into, and I'm telling you now, if he wants to use the word creep is bad and reach is good, I'm not going to argue because he's up there dead now. He'll probably strike me with lightning. Right, what causes it, right? We know it's the inappropriate application of the acceleration, correct? I hope it's correct. I just told you that. Although I'm a fishing guide, I could be bullshitting. Right. So think about this, right? You've got, and sorry about the borders, we have marks everywhere, right? So you've got your fly line is unfolding like that, right? Not quite straight. And while you're in that paused position here, right, you actually do that. Did everyone see what I did? I crept forward. So now my power stroke, and this is my power stroke here, right? My power stroke, which is the length of the power stroke is directly proportional to how much line's held in the air. And for your physical thingo, it'll be different to mine, right? Because you're solid, I'm tall and lanky, you're stronger than me. I'll have an Indian arm wrestle and we'll see. No. But what happens is you've now crept to here and you're moving forward. So you've already started the acceleration before that's straight, and you get to here, to this point with your creep, and now the fly line is straight. So what happens, right? You've crept forward, the lines come straight, and the tip's gone like that immediately. Whereas it should start straight and progressively come through, right? That's why Lefty Kreh says creep is bad, reach is good. What he's trying to say is, if your power stroke is too long for what line's out there, it's very difficult to throw a tailing loop. So he wants you to come back and push up like that to tighten your loop. But what he also wants you to do is, if you're pushing back, you're not creeping forward. Yeah? All right, what's the last rule? No? Straight line path of the rod. Right? Really important. Because if
Do you want to move that whole thing forward a bit so you don't have to reach all the time?
oh, I'm not going to draw much more. I'm bored with it. No.
Yeah, up your back.
Eh?
Reach is good.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Okay, right.
So you go down to the river. We're not going to deal with the next part of the presentation, because the next part of the presentation, this bit has to be right first, right? Otherwise the next bit's not right, right? So you come down, the big thing, and I've been guiding for fly fishermen now for 30 years, over 30 years. The biggest problem is we get excited when that fish is in front of us and all of this crap goes out the window, right? Deborah will tell you, I tell her to aim and look at the bloody fish, right? Don't look at the fish until you're about to cast, and remember to breathe, right? Because if you don't breathe properly, you can't control what your actions are. And the actions are what? Can't start the cast till you move the end of the line. Length of the power stroke is directly proportional to how much line's held in the air. Those guys that are going to Christmas Island, right? They're going to love this, right? The front 30 foot of the line is weighed, and that's the standard. We use a 10 to 15 foot leader. Most of the shots are at 20 feet. So how short's the power stroke? And it's the hardest damn thing to do. Even you guys going trout fishing, same deal. You see those fish that are close and you want a good presentation, right? You've got to get the power stroke right. Yeah?
Out of 6 CIs on the weekend, CI candidates.
Sorry?
Out of 6 CI candidates on the weekend, every one of us struggled with 20-foot cast.
Yeah. It is one of the hardest because you haven't got enough line out the tip of the rod to actually load the rod. The only thing that will load the rod is correct physics. Righto, so everyone's got 100% physics, right? So now we've got to go to the gear, right? We've got to get that good presentation. Can someone give me one difference between a trout line and a saltwater line?
Floating line or?
I don't care. Floating, fast sink, intermediate. Yep, but something that's different between a trout line and a saltwater line.
The thickness.
Thickness?
Thickness.
Oh, it's probably a heavier rod for saltwater. Yep, so that is one difference. Yep.
Temperature performance.
Hey?
Temperature performance.
Yes, most definitely.
Trout line here or
Yep. No. Fly line is made for a temperature first. Ryan's 100% right. It is the most important thing when you get a fly line is to know the water temperature you're going to use it in before you know the purpose. What is the most important part of the fly line?
price.
Hey, listen. No, you are very true, Brian. And I think the companies are starting to take the piss out of us fly fishermen. Who in the hell bought out a $360 fly line?
What a $230 one. That was
No.
bad enough.
No, the new ones are $360 now, these new ones. And the thing is, it's because China can't copy them. China can copy the rods, China can copy the reels, but they can't copy the technology. They've copied the colours. I mean, I've got lines out of China that are the exact... Hey?
It's selling $20 lines.
Yeah, but they can't copy the technology. They just... Because the lines aren't made in China yet. They will get there. And I think that $350 lines is a bit over the top. Anyway, that's beside the point. So, trout lines are made for temperature. Saltwater lines are made for temperature. So if you're down in Melbourne and Sydney, Melbourne and South Australia, and you're saltwater fly fishing, you need a softer line than we do up here in Weipa. Right? There was a line that came out from Airflow as a clear intermediate line. It was one of the first ones. They sent them over to Australia. One went to Justin Duggan down in Sydney. I got one here, and Peter Haynes, not Hayes, Haynes, who was a guide up in Cairns, got one to take up to Weipa. Justin thought the line was really nice. I thought the line was pretty reasonable, but, you know, I was using it like in end of autumn kind of thing. Peter Haynes, he was on the deck of a tinny up at Weipa, stripped the line onto the floor of the tinny, which was aluminium, and the line melted like an egg. So you must know what the temperature is first, because when you lay your line out, and the line's the next thing that comes out of the tip of the rod, you've got to get the line straight. I picked the wrong line up too from home. Let's hope there's some coiling in the running line. Yeah, there we go. You can see the coiling in the running line, right? This line has a 60-pound core, right? But it needs to be prepared before you use it, right? Now, this is actually the reason I picked this topic, because I just did a casting lesson for a guy who had a Rio Flats Pro intermediate line, which he didn't like. Now, one of our entrepreneurial influencers on the internet said the way to get it straight is to pull it through your hand and create heat. Does everyone agree with that? Why?
Creating stresses on the rubber, the plastic.
Exactly right. You cannot put heat into the exterior coating of your fly line. What you're trying to straighten is not the coating, it's the core. This has a 60-pound core, right? So you've got to give it a bit. Now, if you have a look, if I just give this a couple of tweaks, you'll see how the coiling's gone out of it. Now, a trout line, you don't need to really do that because it has a very soft core. It has, in a lot of cases, it has a Dacron core, right? So trout fishermen can walk up to the edge of the stream and they can false cast and put line out and false cast and put line out and make a cast. With a salt water line, you can't do that. You must prepare the line before you do. Otherwise, what happens is this coiling that you have here, and I'll have, this is a pretty old line, I grabbed the wrong one actually, but you can see this coiling, right? So, can everyone see that on the floor? Yeah. If you make a cast to a snag, chasing your mangrove jack there, right, and you haven't straightened your fly line, what will happen is that fly line will lay out and it'll come back like a coil spring, right? So now you have slack, right? That between you and your fly. So you need to stretch the fly line so that fly line is dead straight. So when it goes into the snag, it stays there. Yeah? And most of these lines, and I've seen guys do this, right? This, right? It's not good. It is not good. I've seen guys do it with boots when they're bone fishing because it puts it around a corner. You're better off, you've got more control to do it in your hands, right? You can feel how much pressure you're giving it and you'll feel that it'll kind of break its back like a pair of new shoes. The best fly lines on the market, you will have to do this every time that fly line comes off the reel. Every time.
What?
You'll hear...
Every cast?
No, because the line's not going on the reel. But if you have a tuna, you play that tuna, put it back on the reel, you've now got your line is taken the memory of the reel again. Because I had a guy came, he goes, oh yeah, I've stretched. I said, you just stretch your line? He said, yeah, I had it stretched between the fences for 2 days. Then I wound it back on the reel. Yeah, didn't work at all. So you prepare it every time you take it off the reel. And the place that people forget is the front taper of the fly line. Right, because it's part of the fly line too. Like I've only just pulled the running line off, but that front section of the line, right through the whole section you're using, you want it as straight as a die. Yeah?
So after you've caught a fish,
Yep.
and you put it back on your reel,
Yep.
you'll stretch again before
Yep.
you cast again.
I do. Prepare it. You want it as straight as possible because it won't stay straight.
Will it take that memory within a few minutes?
Sometimes, yeah. How tight's it? Like most of my fishing is tuna fishing, right?
Yeah.
So it's not just getting wound on
Coming on
under you know, 500 grams of pressure or something. It's coming on at probably the maximum drag of that reel. So it's getting packed on the reel. So it goes to that shape. Yeah? Anyone got any questions about fly lines? Because you know what? The fly line is the most technical part of the whole deal.
My first visit to your shop,
Hmm.
I was 6 months here, and I brought my 6-weight freshwater reel and line. I said, can I use this? And you were very polite, you didn't laugh, and said, no, it's cold. And you gave me the whole lesson about the cold water, the warm water, that sort of thing. I walked
Yeah.
into with no.
Trust me, I'm a retailer. How many rods should I have? Yeah.
And it made a big difference.
Yeah.
Run casting, and
Yeah.
and it was supple, but it was just the wrong
Yeah,
setup, that sort of thing.
yeah. It's all
I
about
do
the
remember that.
yeah. Fly fishing. As a fly fisherman, and that's what everybody here is, right? You're now not a passive fisherman, right? You're the predator, and in some cases, I would hope the apex predator, right? So, if you think about it, and I know some of you guys are hunters, right? You've got to know about what you're using, what you're using with your bow, and you've got to practice with your bow, or if you're using a gun, you've got to practice sighting your gun in, you've got to know about your bullets and your fun and whatever. I don't know, I'm not a hunter. But in fly fishing, it's the same. The more you know about your gear, like knowing the sweet spot to be able to false cast with your rod, your line, not his rod and line, your rod and line. You know what I mean? Because your style is different to your style, is different to Deborah's style. Everyone has a different length of power stroke. Everyone has a different way of applying the acceleration. And that's what you could call is, you know, unique to your own fishing situation. The more you can fine-tune that, when the opportunity arises to actually have a shot at a fish that you can see, you're not going to miss it. So practice is a big deal, right? All right.
Got a question about lines.
Yeah, shoot.
So you talked about Mick earlier, our intrepid president, carrying 70 foot of line out. That means he's got running line outside the rod.
Yes, he has.
And I find it a lot more difficult to cast with the running line out than the tapered. Yeah.
Do you know that there are fly lines that you cannot cast 100 feet with? They're not designed for that. So the first thing you got to look at is what line are you using? What line is Nick using? You know, like if we look at a bonefish line, right? A bonefish quick shooter line. Bonefish quick shooter line has a head that's only like 36 feet long, whereas a bonefish line, a standard bonefish line, has like a 45 to 48 foot head. Would someone like to take a guess at why the head is that long?
So you do longer cast, get more line out, carry more line outside the rod tip.
Yeah, but there's a little bit more to it. No, you're down the right track, but just think about that for a sec, right? Go back to the short head and the quick shooter, right? That's what it's called, a bonefish quick shooter, right? Only has a short head. Now, remember what I said before, the hardest shot to make with a bonefish is a 20-foot shot. So if you can have some more weight out of the tip, it helps you, right? But if that bonefish is sitting at, say, 40 feet, then I need to control the head out of the tip of the rod. So if I get the tip of the rod too far on the running line, what happens is the weight of the head does this on the end of the running line. You can't control it. Yeah. So they're two totally different lines. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
I use sometimes a shooting line in the surf.
Yep.
And if I see a channel further away, I'm stuffed, because as soon as that 10 metre of shooting line's gone, I get that the line drops quickly because it's already got into the main line.
So you're using a shooting head? Right.
Yeah.
Now, with a shooting head, right?
Really?
Yeah. When we first started tuna fishing, that's what we used, right? We used wet cell 4 shooting heads, 30 foot long, and then we made this ridiculous running line, which was 35-pound Gouda rod, 100 feet long, and we would thread 15-pound hard mason up 100 feet of running line. It's a 4-hour exercise, right? So you didn't really want to lose it. But here's the thing, right? The amount of head that's out the tip of the rod is the length of your haul. That's it. No. Because you don't want, when you get back to here and you haul down, you don't want the head to come inside the tip of the rod, because it slows it down. Yeah, it can damage your rod even, right? So when you come back again, you've got the length of the haul is outside the tip, and then you shoot it from there. You can't, and like if anyone got a Leviathan 200, 400, 600, yeah. Now they're designed off a shooting head, right? They're the most efficient saltwater line you could ever have. They're the hardest things to learn to cast. But once you learn to cast it, you strip it in till you hit the colour change, and it's black running. It's a black head into a coloured running line, right? So you strip up to hold the colour change, right? You now do a roll cast, right? Right, and everyone knows about roll cast, right? And you roll cast forward, let some line go, trap it. Now what that does to the fly, it brings the fly up in this motion and sits it on the top of the water, right? And then you haul it off the water drop line, and now that colour changes out the tip of the rod, and you can shoot the whole line. That's how they're designed.
Yeah.
But I just had this conversation with Alistair. I think he's hit himself in the head 4 times this morning while he was practicing. Yeah. They're difficult, but there's something that once you learn it, it all makes sense. But if the physics isn't correct and you overpower the rod, what happens is it just won't work. You have to let the rod and the line do it. Yeah. No other question on single line?